The paper crumpled in his fist before he could stop himself. Javon stood in the center of Blackthorn International's lobby, surrounded by glass walls that reflected every Omega in the room except him. His white shirt hung loose over black slacks he'd ironed 3 times that morning, trying to burn away the wrinkles poverty had sewn into the fabric. White canvas shoes, scuffed gray at the toes, squeaked against marble floors that probably cost more than his rent. He couldn't hear the whispers, but he felt them crawling across his skin. The interview panel sat 20 feet away behind a glass partition, 5 alphas in tailored suits leaning back in leather chairs that didn't squeak. One of them pointed at Javon's tablet, the cheap one with the cracked screen he used to communicate. Another alpha shook his head slowly, mouth moving in words Javon didn't need to hear to understand. Too difficult, too much work, too Omega. The blond man's fingers trembled as he smoothed the paper against his thigh. His resume, 3 years of night school, perfect grades, references from managers who'd called him their best worker before corporate found out he was mute and moved him to the back room. None of it mattered here. The lead interviewer, a woman with silver hair and a smile sharp as broken glass, gestured for him to approach. Javon walked forward, each step measured, controlled. He'd learned early that Omegas who moved too fast looked desperate. Omegas who moved too slow looked arrogant. There was no winning, only surviving. She slid a single sheet across the table, one question typed in bold letters. How will you communicate under pressure? Javon picked up his tablet. His thumb hovered over the screen, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He pressed down anyway, typing each word with the careful precision of someone who knew mistakes. W-E-R-E, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. I adapt, I work harder, I listen. The woman read it without looking at him. Behind her, another alpha snorted. That's not an answer, someone muttered. Javon's chest tightened. He typed again, faster this time. I learn faster than most people speak. One of the younger alphas leaned forward, almost interested. But the man beside him, pale skin, cold eyes, a smile that never reached his face, whispered something that made the younger alpha sit back and nod. The silver-haired woman looked up at last. Her expression hadn't changed, but something in her posture shifted, closed off, decided. Thank you for your time. 4 words, that's all it took. Javon's stomach dropped, but his face stayed smooth. He'd practiced this too, how to lose without breaking. He bowed just slightly and turned toward the elevator. His tablet nearly slipped from his grip. Behind him, voices rose. Poor thing. Why waste our time? These Omegas don't know their place anymore. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Javon's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He focused on the elevator doors ahead, 20 feet, 15, 10. If he could just reach them before the tears started, before his breath fractured into something visible, he'd be fine. He pressed the button, the doors slid open. Wait. The word exploded through the lobby like a gunshot. Javon froze, his hand hovered over the elevator sensor, but he didn't turn around. Couldn't, because hope was a trap Omegas like him couldn't afford. Footsteps pounded against marble, fast, desperate. Wait, please. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone dropped a coffee cup. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed off glass walls. Javon stepped into the elevator and turned at last. Blackthorn, CEO Alpha, the man whose silence during the interview had hurt worse than any rejection, was running. His black suit jacket flapped open, dark hair wild, one hand reaching out as if he could pull Javon back through sheer will. Their eyes met for half a second. Kyne's were wide, frantic, desperate in a way that didn't make sense. The elevator doors slid shut between them. Javon sagged against the wall, hands pressed flat against cold metal. His tablet buzzed in his pocket, probably a rejection email already queued and ready. He should check it, delete it, move on. But his fingers drifted lower, resting against his stomach. 3 weeks ago, a free clinic doctor had looked at him with pity and fear. You're carrying triplets, alpha pups. Javon had walked out without asking questions he already knew the answers to. Now, as the elevator descended, he closed his eyes and wondered if he'd just lost the only chance to feed the lives growing inside him. What secret is Blackthorn hiding that made him run after an Omega he just rejected? Javon learned when he was 7 that hope tasted like rust and broken teeth. His guardian, a distant cousin who'd taken him in after his parents died, had smiled while signing the contract. Javon couldn't read yet, couldn't speak, couldn't scream when strange alphas came to the house 3 days later with cash and chains. He'd escaped through a bathroom window, 14 stitches in his left arm from the broken glass. No one ever explained where his cousin went. That was 13 years ago. The lesson stuck. So when the elevator reached the ground floor and Javon stepped into afternoon heat that smelled like exhaust and old asphalt, he didn't look back at Blackthorn International's glass tower. Didn't wonder why an alpha CEO would chase an omega he'd helped humiliate. He just walked 5 miles back to his rented room in a building where the walls were so thin he could hear his neighbor's television through 3 layers of drywall. The landlord called it a studio apartment. Javon called it a box with a hot plate and a mattress that smelled like someone else's regrets. But it was his, no one could take it as long as he paid rent. He pushed open the door it stuck in the frame, always did, and dropped his tablet on the counter. The interview suit came off in pieces, shirt folded carefully, slacks hung on a wire hanger, shoes tucked under the bed. His reflection stared back from a mirror propped against the wall. Blonde hair messy now, falling into brown eyes that looked older than 20, his hand drifted to his stomach again. Flat for now. The clinic doctor had been young, nervous, clearly new. She'd printed out an ultrasound image and circled 3 tiny dots with a shaking pen. Do you know who the father is? Javon had shaken his head. He didn't. Months ago, a night he barely remembered through the haze of fear and adrenaline, he'd found an alpha bleeding in an alley. Poisoned, the man had gasped, "Help me." Javon should have walked away, should have called for help and disappeared. Instead, he dragged the alpha to an emergency clinic 6 blocks away, stayed until doctors rushed the man into surgery, then vanished before anyone could ask questions. 3 weeks later, his body started changing. Now he stood in a rented room that cost more than he earned, carrying pups he couldn't afford, knowing that tomorrow he'd need to find another job interview to fail. His stomach cramped. Just once, sharp enough to make him catch his breath against the counter. How long can an omega hide a pregnancy when his body is already starting to betray him? The clinic smelled like antiseptic and fear. Javon sat on a plastic chair that wobbled every time he shifted his weight. Around him, other omegas waited in silence, some with black eyes hidden behind sunglasses, others with bruises shaped like fingerprints around their wrists. No one made eye contact. The free clinic didn't ask questions. That's why Javon came here instead of a hospital where insurance and records and names mattered. A nurse called him back. She was older, tired, the kind of tired that lived in bones instead of just eyes. She didn't smile when she gestured to the examination table. Uppy. Javon climbed onto the table, paper crinkled under him. The ultrasound machine hummed to life. Cold gel spread across his stomach and the nurse pressed the wand down hard enough to hurt. 3 heartbeats filled the room. Fast, strong, unmistakably alpha. The nurse's hand stilled. She stared at the screen, then at Javon, then back at the screen. Triplets, she said, not a question. Javon nodded. Do you know who the father is? He shook his head. The nurse pulled the wand away and wiped the gel off with rough paper towels. Her movements were mechanical, rehearsed, like she'd had this conversation 100 times before. You need to register this pregnancy within 30 days, state law. If you don't and someone reports you, child services will get involved. She paused. Do you understand? Javon typed on his tablet. What if I can't find the father? Then you register as a single carrier, but if the alpha finds out later and wants custody, she stopped, shook her head. Just register, it's safer. She handed him 3 printed images. Each one showed a tiny shape, barely more than a dot, surrounded by static. Javon stared at them until the edges blurred. The nurse touched his shoulder once briefly, then left. Javon sat alone in the exam room, paper crinkling beneath him, holding 3 pictures of lives he didn't know how to protect. Outside, rain started, soft at first, then harder, drumming against windows like fists. He thought about kind Blackthorn running after him, thought about the desperation in the alpha's eyes, thought about what it meant that the CEO of the most powerful company in the city had chased down an Omega he'd just rejected. His phone buzzed. A notification, job rejection email from Blackthorn International. We regret to inform you. Javon deleted it without reading the rest. Then he folded the ultrasound images, tucked them inside his shirt, and walked back into the rain. What happens when the alpha who unknowingly fathered those pups finally realizes what he lost? Kine Blackthorn didn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, he stood in his office on the 42nd floor, staring at security footage frozen on a single frame. Javon, blonde hair falling into eyes that wouldn't meet the camera. Shoulders curved inward, protective, like he was trying to fold himself into something small enough to disappear. Kine had watched the footage 17 times. Each time the rage burned hotter. Not at Javon, at himself. The interview panel had been stacked. He'd known that going in. His half-brother Darren had recommended 3 of the 5 interviewers personally. Trust me, Darren had said, I found the best. Kine should have questioned it, should have paid attention when Javon walked into the room and every instinct in his body screamed Omega, mine, protect. Instead, he'd stayed silent, watched the panel tear apart someone who'd done nothing wrong except be vulnerable in a room full of predators. He pressed play again. Javon bowed, turned, walked toward the elevator with his head up and hands steady even though Kine could see the tremor in his fingers. Wait, Kine heard himself shout on the recording, his voice cracked, desperate. Too late. The elevator doors closed. Kine slammed his fist against the desk, his knuckles split, blood welled up bright red against pale skin, but he didn't feel it. He felt something else, a memory clawing its way up from months ago. An alley, rain, pain so sharp it turned the world white. Poison, someone had slipped it into his drink during a negotiation with a rival family. He'd barely made it outside before his legs gave out. He remembered collapsing, remembered the taste of copper and concrete, remembered thinking, absurdly, that dying in an alley behind a nightclub was a pathetic way for a Blackthorn to go. Then hands gentle shaking. An Omega. Blonde hair, brown eyes, no voice, but he'd pulled Kine upright anyway, half carrying, half dragging him through rain-slicked streets to a clinic 6 blocks away. Kine had tried to speak, tried to ask the Omega's name, but the poison had already sunk its teeth into his nervous system. He'd woken in a hospital 12 hours later, alive. The Omega was gone. Kine had searched for weeks, but the clinic had no records, no names, no security footage. The Omega had vanished like smoke. Now, staring at Javon's frozen image on the screen, Kine finally understood why the scent in that alley had felt so familiar. Rain, lavender, something sweet underneath, almost hidden. The same scent that had filled the interview room today. Kine's phone buzzed, a text from his assistant. Rejection email sent to candidate J. Rivers per your instructions. Kine stared at the message. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up the interview file. Javon Rivers, 20 years old, no fixed address, references from 3 jobs in 2 years. No emergency contact listed. Kine scrolled down, found the note Darren had attached to the file. This one's a waste of time. Mute Omega, no connections, no value, reject on site. The words blurred. Kine stood so fast his chair crashed backward. Darren hadn't just stacked the interview, he'd sabotaged it, deliberately, viciously. But why would his own brother want to destroy an Omega neither of them knew? Darren Blackthorn had learned early that mercy was a weakness alphas couldn't afford. He stood in his apartment, smaller than Kine's penthouse but still expensive enough to make most people uncomfortable, and poured whiskey into a crystal glass. Outside, the city glittered like broken teeth. His phone buzzed, a message from one of the interview panelists. He's gone, left the building 20 minutes ago. Darren smiled. Perfect. Kine didn't know yet, probably wouldn't figure it out until morning. By then, the Omega would be just another failure, another name buried in rejection files no one ever looked at twice. Darren had nothing personal against Javon Rivers, didn't know him, didn't care. But he knew what Omegas like that represented. Weakness, vulnerability, the kind of soft-hearted nonsense that got alphas killed. Kine had been spiraling for months, Ever since that night he'd nearly died in an alley, he'd been different, distracted, obsessed with finding some Omega who'd helped him. Darren had watched his half-brother waste time, money, and resources chasing a ghost. Then Javon Rivers applied for a job. The moment Darren saw the application, mute Omega, no connections, blonde hair, brown eyes, he knew. This was the one Kine had been searching for. So Darren made sure the interview panel understood exactly what to do, made sure Kine would be forced to watch the rejection happen in real time, made sure the Omega would walk away humiliated, broken, and convinced Kine didn't care. Because if Kine found his precious Omega, everything would change. Kine would get soft, start making decisions based on emotion instead of strategy. Weakness would spread through the company like rot. Darren couldn't allow that. He raised his glass to the window. "To ghosts," he murmured. His phone buzzed again, different number this time, unknown. He answered. "It's done," a voice said, rough, unfamiliar. "Good, and the address?" "Sending it now." Darren hung up. A text appeared seconds later, an address in the industrial district, low-income housing. He forwarded it to 3 contacts, no names, just numbers. Then he deleted the message and finished his whiskey. By sunrise, Javon Rivers would have bigger problems than a failed interview. How far will jealousy push an alpha when his brother's obsession threatens everything he's built? The door hung open like a broken jaw. Kine's men reached Javon's building at dawn when the sky was still bruised purple and the streetlights flickered between on and off. The lead security officer, Marcus, a beta who'd worked for Kine for 6 years, took one look at the splintered doorframe and pulled his weapon. "Boss," he said into his phone, "we're too late." Kine was already moving. He'd left his office 15 minutes ago, still wearing yesterday's suit, dried blood crusting his knuckles. How bad? Marcus stepped inside. The room had been torn apart. Mattress slashed open, stuffing scattered across the floor like snow, the hot plate ripped from the wall, wires dangling, clothes thrown everywhere, pockets turned inside out. Someone had been searching for something. Or someone. "Gone," Marcus said. "Place is destroyed, no sign of the Omega." Kine's chest constricted. "Blood." "No, but..." Marcus crouched beside the overturned mattress, picked up something small. "There's a tablet here, cracked screen, looks like he used it to communicate." "Bag it, I'm 5 minutes out." Marcus stood, scanning the room. Movement caught his eye, the landlord, hovering in the hallway, wringing his hands. "You," Marcus pointed, "when did this happen?" The landlord was old, shaking, clearly terrified. "Early, maybe 4 in the morning, I heard." He stopped, swallowed, shouting, crashing. "I called the police, but..." "But what?" "They said it wasn't a priority, told me to file a report online." Marcus's jaw tightened. Of course they did. Omega in a low-income building, no one cared. "Did you see who did this?" The landlord nodded frantically. 3 men, big, one of them had a tattoo here. He touched his neck, like a snake. Marcus knew that tattoo. Darren's crew, the men his boss's half-brother kept on payroll for jobs that required violence and silence. Kine arrived 6 minutes later. He took the stairs 3 at a time, burst into the room and stopped. The destruction registered first, then the scent. Lavender, rain, faint now, almost gone, but still there underneath the stink of violence. And something else, sweeter, softer. Kine's alpha instincts kicked in before his brain could catch up. He moved through the room, following the scent to the corner where the mattress had been, crouched, pressed his hand against the floor. Warm. Javon had been here recently, within the last hour. "Boss," Marcus said quietly. The landlord saw Darren's men. Kine didn't respond. His hand curled into a fist against the floor, knuckles white. Darren had done this. His own brother had sent men to terrorize an Omega who'd done nothing except save Kine's life. "Find him," Kine said. His voice was flat, cold, the kind of cold that came before fire. "I don't care what it takes. Find Javon Rivers before they do." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, if Darren's involved." "I know what it means." It meant war. Where do you take an Omega when every second he stays missing brings him closer to disappearing forever? The warehouse smelled like rust and old blood. Javon knelt on concrete that pressed cold through his jeans, hands bound behind his back with zip ties that cut into his wrists. His head throbbed where one of the men had slammed him against a wall. His vision kept sliding in and out of focus. 3 alphas surrounded him. The one with the snake tattoo on his neck leaned against a metal support beam, smoking a cigarette. The other 2 stood on either side, blocking any path to the door 50 feet away. No one had spoken in 20 minutes. Javon's heart hammered so hard he thought his ribs might crack. He kept his breathing steady, shallow, trying not to let them see the panic clawing up his throat. Then footsteps slow, deliberate. A 4th alpha entered, younger than the others, dressed in expensive clothes that didn't belong in a place like this. Dark hair, cold eyes, a smile that made Javon's stomach turn. Darren Blackthorn. Javon recognized him from the office building. He'd been sitting behind the glass during the interview, whispering to the others. Darren circled him like a wolf, deciding where to bite first. His presence pressed down, suffocating, the kind of alpha dominance that demanded submission. Javon kept his eyes on the floor, not out of respect, out of survival. "You know why you're here?" Darren asked. His voice was soft, almost conversational. Javon didn't respond, couldn't. Darren crouched in front of him, close enough that Javon could smell cologne and whiskey and something rotten underneath. "My brother has a weakness," Darren continued. "He thinks loyalty matters, that Omegas like you deserve protection." He laughed. "You saved his life once, now he thinks he owes you something." Javon's breath caught. They knew he was the one from the alley. "So here's what's going to happen." Darren pulled out a knife, not threatening yet, just present. "You're going to disappear, quietly, no bodies, no evidence, just another Omega who couldn't make it in the big city." He tilted his head. "Unless you run, make this difficult, then things get messy." Javon's hands shook behind his back. He wanted to type, to explain, to beg, but his tablet was gone, smashed during the fight at his apartment. He was invisible, voiceless. Darren stood, gestured to the men. "Make sure he understands the stakes." One of the alphas stepped forward, grabbed Javon's shoulder, squeezed hard enough to bruise. His pheromones flooded the space, aggression, dominance, cruelty. Javon's body reacted before his mind could stop it. He flinched away, curling inward, instinctively protecting his stomach. The movement lasted half a second, but it was enough. The alpha paused, his grip loosened. He looked down at Javon's midsection, eyes narrowing. Then he inhaled. Scent didn't lie, especially not to alphas trained to hunt Omegas. The man's expression shifted, confusion first, then shock. "He's carrying," the alpha said. The room went silent. Darren turned slowly. "What?" "He's pregnant, I can smell it, faint but—" The alpha leaned closer, inhaled again, his eyes widened. "Alpha pups, multiple." Darren stared at Javon. For a long moment no one moved. Then Darren smiled. It was the worst thing Javon had ever seen. "Well," Darren said softly, "that changes everything." He crouched again, knife still in hand, and pressed the blade lightly against Javon's throat, not cutting, just reminding. "Whose are they?" Darren asked. Javon's pulse pounded against the metal. He shook his head frantically. "You don't know?" Darren laughed. "Of course you don't, Omegas like you never do." He leaned closer, breath hot against Javon's ear. "But I think I know, and if I'm right," he pulled back, eyes glittering, "then you're not just a problem anymore, you're leverage." The knife traced down from Javon's throat to his chest, stopping over his heart. "How much do you think my brother would pay to keep you alive?" Darren mused. "More importantly, how much would he pay to keep those pups safe?" Javon couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His body locked down, every instinct screaming at him to protect the lives growing inside him even though he had no way to fight back. Darren stood, addressed his men. "Change of plans, we keep him alive for now." He looked down at Javon. "You're going to help me teach my brother a very important lesson about weakness." The warehouse door exploded inward. Metal shrieked, concrete dust filled the air, and through the chaos, kind Blackthorn stepped inside like a storm given human form. Can an Alpha CEO save the Omega carrying his pups before his own brother destroys everything? Kind didn't announce himself. He just moved. The first Alpha went down with a broken jaw before he could pull his weapon. The second tried to run. Marcus tackled him from behind, slamming him face first into concrete. The third, the one with the snake tattoo, lunged at Kine with a knife. Kine caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted, and the blade clattered away. He drove his knee into the man's ribs, once, twice. The sound of cracking bone echoed through the warehouse. Then Kine saw Javon. Kneeling, hands bound, blood trickling from his temple, eyes wide with terror. Everything else disappeared. Kine crossed the space in 3 strides, dropping to his knees in front of the Omega. His hands shook as he pulled out a knife and cut through the zip ties. "I've got you," Kine said, his voice cracked. "You're safe, I've got you." Javon stared at him like he didn't understand the words. Behind them, Darren laughed. "Touching," he said. "Really, but you're too late, brother." Kine stood slowly, placing himself between Javon and Darren. His alpha presence flooded the warehouse, rage, dominance, the promise of violence. "Walk away," Kine said, "now while you still can." Darren tilted his head. "You're protecting him, an Omega you just met," he smiled. "Or maybe you already knew him, maybe he's the one you've been searching for, the one who saved you." Kine's jaw tightened. "Thought so." Darren took a step forward. "Did you know he's pregnant, carrying triplets, alpha pups?" His smile widened. "Yours." Kine froze. Everything in the warehouse went silent. Javon's breath hitched behind him. Kine turned slowly, looked down at the Omega still kneeling on cold concrete, arms wrapped protectively around his middle. Their eyes met. And Kine smelled it, underneath the fear and blood and adrenaline, something sweeter, softer, undeniably familiar. His scent mixed with Javon's. "Life growing fragile." "Mine," Kine whispered. Javon's eyes filled with tears. He nodded once. The world tilted. Kine had spent months searching for the Omega who saved him, had replayed that night 1,000 times, wondering why someone would risk themselves for a stranger. Now he understood. Javon hadn't just saved his life. He'd given Kine a future. Darren's voice cut through the moment like broken glass. "Congratulations, brother, you're going to be a father." He gestured to his remaining men. "Take them." But Marcus was already moving. Backup flooded through the door, 6 men, all loyal to Kine, all armed. Darren's crew dropped their weapons. Kine didn't take his eyes off Javon. He crouched again slowly and held out his hand. "I should have stopped you," Kine said quietly. "In the lobby, during the interview, I should have protected you then." His voice roughened. "I'm protecting you now." Javon stared at the offered hand, then slowly he reached out and took it. Kine pulled him to his feet, steadying him when he swayed. Behind them, Marcus hauled Darren toward the door. "This isn't over," Darren snarled. Kine didn't respond. He just wrapped his arm around Javon's shoulders and guided him outside into morning light that felt too bright, too clean after the darkness of the warehouse. Javon leaned against him, exhausted, terrified, but alive. "What happens when the alpha who unknowingly fathered your pups finally claims you, but the world isn't ready to let you be together?" The penthouse was quiet. Javon sat on a leather couch that probably cost more than a year of his rent, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like cedar and something distinctly alpha. Kine's scent, it should have terrified him. Instead, it felt safe. Kine stood across the room, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and sharp as he coordinated with lawyers, security, media teams, cleaning up the mess Darren had made. An hour ago, police had arrested Darren Blackthorn on charges of kidnapping, assault, conspiracy. Kine's lawyers made sure every charge stuck. But Javon couldn't stop shaking. Kine ended the call, crossed the room, sat down beside Javon, not close enough to crowd but near enough to be present. "Doctor's coming," Kine said quietly. "She'll check you, make sure you and the—" He stopped, swallowed. "Make sure you're all okay." Javon nodded, picked up the new tablet Kine had given him. His fingers hovered over the screen. "Why did you run after me?" Kine read it, his jaw worked for a moment before he answered. "Because I remembered you," he said. "From the alley, you saved my life and disappeared before I could thank you. I spent months looking." He met Javon's eyes. "Then you walked into my building and I knew, but I—" His voice roughened. "I let you walk away, I let them hurt you, that's on me." Javon typed again. "You didn't know." "I should have." Kine's hands clenched into fists. "I should have stopped the interview, should have questioned Darren, should have." Javon reached out, touched Kine's arm. The alpha went still. Slowly, Javon pulled his hand back and typed. You came for me, that's what matters. Kine stared at the words, then he did something Javon didn't expect. He took Javon's hand, carefully like it was something precious. The pups, Kine said softly, are they? He stopped, started again, can I? Javon understood. He guided Kine's hand to his stomach, flat still but underneath life pulsed. 3 heartbeats fast and strong. Kine's breath caught, his hand spread wide, palm warm through Javon's shirt. Mine, he whispered, not possessive, awed. Javon nodded. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Kine spoke again, voice rough with emotion he didn't try to hide. I won't force you to stay, won't claim you if you don't want that, but I will protect you, and them, even if the whole city tries to stop me. Javon picked up his tablet. What if I want to stay? Kine looked up, their eyes met. Then stay, Kine said simply. Outside, the city stretched below them, glass and steel and chaos. But here, 42 floors above it all, 2 people who should never have met sat together in silence. And for the first time in years, Javon felt something he'd thought was gone forever. Hope. But when the morning news breaks, will that hope survive the storm coming for them both? The headline hit at 6 a.m. Blackthorn heir accused of Omega coercion. Pregnant Omega in CEO's penthouse raises questions. Kine stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows watching the sunrise paint the city gold. Behind him, television screens cycled through news coverage, his face, Javon's blurred image, speculation presented as fact. His lawyers had warned him this would happen. Darren's arrest had triggered media-feeding frenzy. Now reporters were digging, questioning, spinning narratives that fit their audiences. The truth didn't matter, only the story. Javon emerged from the bedroom, still pale, moving carefully. He'd slept 4 hours. The doctor had cleared him medically but warned about stress. Now he stood beside Kine, staring at the screens. They think you hurt me, Javon typed. I know. Will you tell them the truth? Kine turned, looked at the Omega who'd saved his life, carried his pups, survived his brother's cruelty. I'll tell them whatever you want me to, Kine said. This is your story too, your choice. Javon's fingers moved across the tablet. What if we tell them together? Kine's chest tightened. You don't have to do that, the media will tear you apart. They're already doing that. Fair point. An hour later, Kine stood in front of cameras, reporters, flashing lights. Javon stood beside him, silent, steady. Kine spoke without notes. 3 months ago, I was poisoned during a business negotiation. I nearly died in an alley, and Omega, Javon Rivers, saved my life. He asked for nothing, expected nothing, disappeared before I could thank him. Cameras clicked, reporters leaned forward. Yesterday, my half-brother Darren Blackthorn orchestrated an attack on Javon. He's now in custody facing multiple felony charges. Kine's voice hardened. The accusations against me are false. Javon is here by choice. He's carrying my children, yes, that's confirmed, and I will spend the rest of my life proving he made the right decision to trust me. Silence. Then the questions erupted. But Javon stepped forward, held up his tablet. Someone handed him a microphone. A computerized voice read his typed words aloud. Kine Blackthorn did not coerce me. He protected me when no one else would. These pups are his. I'm here because I choose to be, and anyone who questions that can answer to me. The room went quiet. Then applause, small at first, then louder. Not everyone believed them, but enough did. Later, back in the penthouse, Javon sat on the couch again. Kine sat beside him, close enough now that their shoulders touched. Outside, the city continued its chaos, but here they had something the world couldn't take. Choice, truth, and 3 lives growing between them. Javon picked up his tablet one more time. What happens now? Kine smiled. For the first time in months, it reached his eyes. Now, he said, we figure it out together. Javon leaned against him. Kine's arm came around his shoulders. And in the silence, the kind that didn't need words, 2 people who'd saved each other began building something neither had thought possible. A future. This is just the beginning of Javon and Kine's story. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next, because the enemies Darren left behind aren't finished and the pups growing inside Javon will change everything. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Your words might inspire someone else who needs to hear this story. Together, we create stories that matter.